the spirit of prophecy. What happened in Egypt when it says that God sent the plague? It looks like God sent the plague, but remember what we talked about when we interpreted that. When it said God judged, what does it mean? It says he judged the other gods.
Right.
What does that mean?
He declared them to be what they really are.
He declared them to be incapable of giving life and only able to give death.
Right.
And when he called them what they were, do you know what manifested? What they give.
That's right.
Right? And what's interesting is each one of those plagues represented one of the gods of Israel, or Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would worship like the frog god. Or we'll use the Nile. They had a Nile god that they worshipped. And they thought this Nile god could give us life. And so when the plague came to the Nile and the Nile had blood, what was that declaring? God's judgment that your Nile god can't give you life. It can only give you this death. It wasn't God giving them death they didn't already have. It was God revealing what they were believing on gives death.
Right.
And all God did was walk through declaring, your gods can't give life. God would just be walking through Egypt. The wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. The wages your idols will pay you with is death,
Right.
but the gift I will give you is eternal life. That's all God was doing, walking through, declaring that. And then things are just made manifest for what they are. Did Jesus make the demons take people's body over when he walked by them?
No.
It just happened, didn't it? What was going on there? What was in them was made manifest in the presence of Jesus because he is the truth.
Right.
Right? And so whenever the truth is revealed, it reveals things for what it lays them bare.
Mm-hmm.
It lays them naked for what they are. Right? That's
true.
beautiful what you said about Revelation.
Yeah.
But Paul, it's so interesting. Man, God knows what he's doing, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But if Paul would have had, if his course wasn't to be taken into captivity and to preach to the Gentile guards and everything there, and then to be offered up, and if he would have sat around for another 50 years and got to write for another 50 or so years, the things that he could have disseminated would have blown people's minds.
Sure.
Because we just gloss over the forbearance of God that Paul talks about. We don't consider, what does that mean, the forbearance of God?
Yeah.
What is he holding back?
Right.
What is the wages of sin? Right? And
You know, it's interesting, though. I believe that the sons of perdition, when they see these things coming to them, they will perceive that it is coming from God.
oh, absolutely.
They will believe that it's from God.
Absolutely. What did Nimrod say? Let us make a name for ourselves. Because he perceived it was God that was killing them.
Right.
And not sin.
Mm.
So he got all the people together and said, we can't trust that guy to preserve us. We're going to make a name for ourselves. We're going to preserve our own lives. And what did they get busy doing? Building the Tower of Babel. Why did they want to build the Tower of Babel? Why did they want to build that thing up to the heaven?
Reach heaven.
What did they think they were going to escape, though?
I wonder.
The next flood. Nimrod is real quick after
Yeah.
the
Right.
flood. The first couple of generations right after that. It says Nimrod was a mighty hunter before God. What that means is he shook his fist at God and said, the hell you will. We're going to make a name for ourselves. Right? It talked about, before the flood, it talked about the line of Seth. And it said, then began the time where men began calling upon the name of the Lord.
Mm.
What does that mean? It means to allow God to surname you. To take his name as your own name. To say, he's my father.
Yeah.
I am his son. Those who are led by the Spirit of God do what? Cry out, Abba. So the line of Seth were all these guys that had cried out, Abba. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Nimrod was not one of those guys. He said, I'm going to make a name for myself.
Yeah.
I'm a mighty man of renown. We're going to make a name for ourselves. We ain't taking your name as our own. We ain't trusting in you to preserve our lives. We're going to preserve our own lives. Right?
Yeah.
And if we want to look at it in our modern context, he basically gave God the bird.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what they're calling the Nephilim. The Nephilim being the mighty men of renown.
Yeah. And they are.
Okay.
But the Nephilim, the mighty men of renown, would be those who set about to make a name for themselves by their own works. Right? So
Yeah.
Cain, mighty man of renown, he made the first cities. So he's busy making these gigantic structures while Noah and Seth and those guys are sitting up on the mountain looking at the stars and thinking, why are those guys down there working? Don't they know that we're going to inherit the earth? That God wants to give us the earth as a gift?
Yeah.
Don't we know that? Don't they know about the promise? Haven't those guys heard the promise? Why are they busy down there working? Do you see? But Cain was a mighty man of renown. We've got to make ourselves a name. And how are they going to make themselves a name? By laboring and toiling. Through the works of their own hands. They were giants in the earth. As far as the world was concerned, who do you think they were talking more about? Cain or Seth? Who do you think looked better in the eyes of the world? You can just imagine all the people talking about the glorious city that Cain made.
Sure, right.
Look how glorious that city Cain made is.
Yeah.
Seth has just been sitting up on the mountain like a lazy ass. Mighty man of renown.
Yes.
And then now we see the antithesis of this in Jesus, because what does Paul say in Philippians, I believe? He says, Jesus made himself of no reputation.
Right.
He entered into the earth and said, I'm not going to make a name for myself. I'm going to take the Father's name as my name. I'm going to allow the Father to surname me. I'm going to allow the Father to make a name for me. Right? He is the antithesis of the mighty man of renown.
Right.
He is the antithesis of a giant in the earth. What does Isaiah say about Jesus? That when we looked at him, there was nothing of beauty to behold.
Right.
We determined that. There was nothing comely about him, it says. We didn't think there was anything to be desired. Isn't he the carpenter's son? Homeboy's born in Nazareth. But look at Caiaphas. Caiaphas is the high priest. Certainly, Caiaphas is someone. Caiaphas, a mighty man of renown. He was a giant in the earth. He made a name for himself by exalting himself by his works. Jesus came in, made himself of no reputation. When the world looked at the two of them, the world spoke of the greatness of Caiaphas and the nothingness of Jesus.
Yes.
Yep. Caiaphas had something to attain to. Look at the glory. We looked at Jesus. Isn't that the carpenter's son from Nazareth? What?
Yeah.
He's nothing. He's no one. Even his own siblings. If you're the Christ, why are you here while they're having the feast?
Yeah.
They're telling him in John chapter 7, I think. 6 or 7. Why don't you go down to the feast then and show yourself if you're the Messiah? They said. What did Jesus say? Oh, no, go out there. Go out there on your own. And then he does show up later. And that's the famous account of the woman caught in adultery.
Right.
Where he's in the middle of the temple. And he stands up, and in the middle of the temple on the day where they're celebrating Torah, he stands up and says, I am the Torah. Can you imagine what those people freaking thought?
Yeah,
What? What did that guy just... Isn't that the carpenter?
Yeah.
Son? Isn't that guy from Nazareth?
Right.
Can any good thing come out of Nazareth? That dude don't even have sandals. What does he mean he's the Torah? Do you see the difference there between a giant in the earth and the God-man? The God-man the world does not acknowledge the God-man for what he is or what she is. The world doesn't acknowledge us yet for what we are. Right? That's what John talks about. 1 John, I think chapter 5. It says, Beloved, now are we the sons and daughters of God.
Right.
But the world has not acknowledged the beauty and the glory that is in us. But we know this. In the day, we see Jesus. We're going to be the same as him.
Yeah.
Poof. The same as what? When he was glorified immortal and raised from the dead and ascended to the right hand of God. The world is going to behold the glory God ascribed to us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
We'll be giants in the earth, so to speak, then. Not in the sense of the scriptures talk about it, but just in reality. Like no one's going to be saying anymore, there's nothing comely in them or of any beauty to behold. No one's going to be saying that no more. Right? No one's going to be confused anymore.
Right.
Yeah.